Hi guys, hope everyone's well and welcome back to the Improvement Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to touch on what data you should track. So, the reason behind the episode is so you know exactly what variables, what things you can track to make sure you're setting yourself up well to progress, track your progress, and ensure everything's in a good spot to allow you to progress effectively. And data pretty much meaning the information that you should be tracking. And as for what to consider when we're thinking about if we should track certain data is, first of all, is it actually actionable? What I mean by that is there's a lot of things we can potentially track or devices we can use to track certain data, but can we actually do anything off that data? Data is only good if the data we can action things off of, or it allows us to then make decisions based off of it. What I mean by that is if someone knows what their, let's say they know their HRV or their heart rate variability, how much their heart rate changes. Yes, that's maybe interesting to see, but does that actually do anything to change your decision making? At the end of the day, we want to make sure it actually changes our decision making. Because if not, you might just be tracking things for the sake of it, which will just maybe make the process more stressful because you've got more things to juggle, more things to manage on a daily basis. So we want to consider, is it actually actionable? We also want to consider if it's worth the time and effort. So even if something is valuable to know and be aware of, if let's say to track that certain metric or whatever, it takes a lot of time out of our day, or it causes a lot of stress, or it's just a really big inconvenience to do, then maybe it's not worth actually doing. Maybe it's better using other metrics unless it is really valuable to use whatever data I'm on about here to kind of track things, if that makes sense. So yeah, is it actionable? Is it worth the time and effort? And is there other negative effects of tracking? Like for some clients, I might not have them track their calories and I might just have them on a meal plan because for them they have negative effects based off tracking calories, which is not worth the negative trade-off of them tracking, and I'd rather them just follow a meal plan or have another way of approaching their goal. And as well as that, like I said, stress, time consumption can all be ways or negative effects of actually tracking that data itself. Or sometimes it can just maybe mess with your head. A good example, sleep. Sleep, something that when I've tracked in the past, I used to look at it every single morning. And then whenever I slept well, I just looked at it and got stressed out whenever I slept poorly. And as a result, I went into the session thinking, oh, I hope it's going to be a good one. Kind of nervous that I won't perform well and kind of planting the seed I'm not going to perform well before I even start. And also, like if my Aura ring, which is just like a health tracking ring that you can wear, if it told me like my readiness wasn't great or my energy wasn't great heading into my session, that's then going to kind of mess with my head in terms of how I think I'm going to perform. And at the end of the day, I'm still going to train regardless if my Aura ring says I'm battered or not. I'm not going to be like, I'm not going to check in with my coach and be like, oh, I didn't train because it said that I wasn't ready for my session. I'm still going to train. So realistically, like, how does it impact your decision making is what we want to consider at the end of the day. And also, do you have a reason to track it? For example, if I've got a client and they're always nailing something like their water intake, I might not get them to track it. Whereas if I've got another client and they're always hit or miss with their water, I might get them to track that variable. So, do you have reason to track it? Is it valuable to track it? Does it keep you accountable to being consistent? Does it allow you to assess and make decisions? There should be a reason why you are tracking certain variables. Because tracking more variables doesn't give you better progress. Like, what's measured is managed, but does it actually help you manage things, if that makes sense? And with tracking certain data, there's ways you can basically progress without actually tracking things at all. What I mean by that is it's very popular to track calories nowadays and protein, which is great. It's very beneficial, But there's ways of doing so without, if someone doesn't want to track or doesn't feel like they want to. And a good example I'll give to my in-person personal training clients is, like, I'm like, you don't need to track calories. Like, what do you do with, see if you've got a dog, your dog's not losing weight. What do you do? Do you put them on a calorie target and a protein target? No. You usually know how much you feed them, so you just give them less leftovers, get them to move more. You're the exact same. Like, if you want to lose weight, all you need to know is you need to eat more, or sorry, eat less and move more. So you can do so without actually tracking, just by being routine and having similar food choices. So don't think you need to track certain variables. You can progress just through having habits in place as well. Same applies with like things like steps. People don't need to track steps. They can just do so by having habits, like going 120-minute walk every day, and then just keeping those habits in place. And then if they then stall, then changing things accordingly, and just basically then adjusting things from there. And we can therefore like change our calorie intake without, or change our expenditure without actually tracking either of them. And in other words, yeah, just using habits pretty much. So if someone's, let's say, eating similar foods daily, they're not losing weight, they just need to know they need to eat less or move more. You don't need to put that in MyFitnessPal to work that out. And yeah, a good thing to track, or a good few bits of data to track if you're wanting to assess your progress, I'd say, is progress photos. That will allow you to actually see if you're in a gaining phase, if the weight's going on via muscle tissue, or if the weight's going on via body fat. If you're in a dieting phase, tracking your progress photos, will help you see, right, are you retaining the muscle tissue that you want to retain while you're dieting down. And also things like scale weight, because sometimes it can be hard to see that visual change when you are using just progress photo, when you're using progress photos, especially in like a short period of time. So using scale weight can be a good tool to assess if you've got like an appropriate rate of loss, and as a result help you make progress at like a good rate and a reasonable rate throughout your dieting phase. And just to quickly expand on that, if you are wondering what like a good rate of loss is to lose at when you're dieting, around about 1% of body weight per week's not a bad place to be. If you are in a gaining phase, however, and you're looking for a good rate of gain, around about 1% of body weight per month, not per week, per month, is a good place to be. And with the training side of things, the things I recommend tracking regarding training is going to be logbooking your lifts, and also tracking like what rep ranges you work in, what amount of volume you're doing, and also things like your execution. What I mean by that is, it's all good like logbooking your lifts, but if you don't know what your execution is, like your tempo, then tracking that's important. So if you pause certain movements, just writing a wee mental note that you pause them. And if you, let's say, are doing anything that you just need to be aware of to remember it in the subsequent week, then tracking that can be great. And logbooking lifts can have both benefits and drawbacks. Benefits include knowing exactly what you've done last week, so you can ensure you are providing a form of progression. It also allows you to track if things aren't progressing, and therefore troubleshoot why they aren't progressing. If it might be due to the exercise being stale and just needing swapped out, or it could be something wrong with your exercise structure, or you not recovering session to session. So there's a lot of benefits with it, and also enjoyment, and it gives you a sense of purpose, a goal every single time you step in the gym. However, there's certain drawbacks of tracking your training, like you have emotional attachment to what weight you're lifting, leading you to lift more and more when that might actually be counterproductive to keeping your form standardized. It might also be counterproductive towards also like if maybe your joints aren't feeling good, but you go in and you think, oh, I need to lift more, then that can be a downside of it. So it causes you to actually forget the goal. So it's good to remember the goal when we are training and progressing our lifts isn't to progress load, it's to progress the stimulus we're putting on the target muscle. And when you chase loads, sometimes that doesn't lead to a better stimulus. It can actually lead to a worse stimulus. So make sure the quality of the work isn't dropping in a pursuit of doing more. The quality of the work should always be at the forefront of your head. That should always remain high. And as for the nutrition, what things should you kind of track and have in place? So for people who want to have like a good eye on how much calories they're eating or what their body weight's doing, and they want to predictably take their body weight up or down, I recommend either tracking your calories and protein, or alternatively just having a sort of meal plan approach to create predictability with your body weight. And if you are following a meal plan approach, obviously, or not maybe obvious for some individuals, but I do recommend making sure you calculate how much protein you're consuming and making sure that meal plan or that template has a sufficient amount of protein in it before going ahead and tracking it, just so if you're eating the same thing daily, you're definitely hitting that goal in terms of your protein. Also, things like having appropriate amount of fruit and veg. So you don't necessarily need to track every single time you have it, or you don't need to. Yeah, so you don't need to, but just trying to make sure having your 5 a day is a good spot to be. Like, you don't need to track if you have 6 or 7 or whatever, but just ensure you're having 5 is a good spot to be in. And salt will play a part in our hydration. So again, not something we necessarily need to track, but something I'd keep a constant and I'd ensure I'm having. So a good place to be is salting every single meal to taste. I wouldn't necessarily need to weigh out and track your salt, but salting every meal to taste is a good way to, again, keep it standardized and keep it in a good spot. And same with, like, because again, see if it's the exact same, you don't need to track it, which is what I touched on. And with water intake, you can track water if you want. You can drink to first. I don't like drinking to first personally, because what if I'm really busy and I just don't notice I'm thirsty, which can sometimes be the case. I want predictability of my ability to train and perform, so I personally track how much water I consume and have that the same on a day-to-day basis. And pick which ones make the most sense. Pick which ones you feel like you're slipping up on. If someone absolutely loves eating their fruit and veg and they always nail it, then don't track that. If someone's always drinking a ton of water and you know you're hydrated, you don't need to track it. Track what things you think are going to move the needle forward with your nutrition. Because if something's consistently good, you don't actually need to track it. A few other things we can consider keeping an eye on is things like sleep. So sleep's something good to track. And the reason being is it just gives you accountability. Like if I go about my week and then I look at my sleep at the end of the week and I see my average is down, then I like look back, I reflect, and I think, right, what have I done different? What have I done worse that has led to me having poorer sleep? And as a result, I can then troubleshoot that issue and fix it so that I do sleep better that week after. And it also can indicate and let you know why maybe you didn't progress as much that week, or you did progress more. Sleep's also, as I touched on earlier, it's good tracking things that are actually meaningful, and sleep can be one of them, because if I track my sleep and I put a new supplement in my plan, or I put a new habit in place to improve my sleep quality, and I see my sleep duration rise, then that is obviously a sign that it's worked. So it allows you to assess if things are working or not, tracking sleep when you are making changes. And also things like steps is not bad to track, because it again gives you a predictable rate of gain and predictable rate of loss. You can potentially move away from tracking steps when you are in a gaining phase. For clients that do have quite low step count, I still like having a step goal in, because it gives them a baseline level of activity, and getting outside we know can have a good impact on your ability to manage your stress, recover just from general movement, digest your food effectively, and also help your sleep due to getting sunlight exposure. But if I've got a client and I know they work a very, very active job and they're always getting a ton of steps and they always get a ton at the weekend without even trying to, then I might get them to either not have a step goal or not track them completely. And it depends on the client as well. Like, see if I know a client loves nerding out and tracking all these bits of data, I might get them to track more of. If a client doesn't, then I'll get them to track less of it. Something you can also track is blood glucose, which is basically like a reading that shows you how insulin sensitive you are and how well you're utilizing the carbohydrates you're consuming, which I think can have merit doing time to time when you're in a gaining phase to ensure you're partitioning the food you're consuming correctly towards muscle mass and not body fat, and as a result maintaining like a good lean body composition throughout your gaining phase. So that's something I personally track, and I just done it the other day actually, and I don't do it like every day etc. I just do it the odd weekend here and there and just keep an eye on it. And like I said, it's only good tracking things if you can action things on it. But things like your blood glucose, you can actually take things like or consider adding in cardio activity to help manage it, or you can consider the placement of your food. You can consider using a glucose disposal agent to manage it accordingly. Things like blood pressure, not something most natural athletes, bodybuilders will need to really consider unless you're unfit or your body weight's very, very high. But that's something you can track just to make sure your general health's in a good spot. Something I'll get some clients to track as well is, and I'll kind of do without even kind of thinking it, is like stress management techniques. So doing things like tracking, maybe meditate, like again, the good thing about tracking things is you want to track things that are actually beneficial for you. So if someone's got like high stress, I'll get clients to monitor their stress on a week to week basis, and I'll get clients to monitor if they've been deep breathing, if they've got off their phone the last hour before bed, and different things like that. That know it's going to impact their stress in a positive and negative manner to ensure it's in a good spot. So yeah, you can track different stress management techniques, but again, it comes down to, is it beneficial for yourself, and things like energy levels, etc. Because we want to track things that we can actually that will influence our decision making pretty much at the end of the day. We don't just want to track different variables for the sake of it. And yeah, hope the episode helped. So to quickly recap, when we're thinking about what data we should track, we want to make sure we can actually do something actionable off that data, if it's worth the time of effort, if there's positive and negative effects, and how time consuming it is to track, like, and if we have a reason to. So, and if it is already in a great spot, you can go about tracking with, or not tracking whatever bit of info you're on about. It's just a case of what's measured is also managed. So if you feel like you want to get the most out of your results, tracking these different variables can ensure they're in a good spot and allow you to keep yourself accountable, which can be a good enough reason on its own to track certain things. Hope everyone has a great and productive week. Thanks very much for watching or listening. If you did enjoy the episode, any story tags, shares are massively appreciated. And thank you again.